What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and I host the only program in the world for fathers and dads that's sponsored by Dove Men Care. It is also co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization. And I'm also the board chair for the Global Food and Drink Initiative. That's a not-for-profit whose goal is to showcase Blacks in the diaspora who are doing their thing in food, wine, and travel. We're broadcasting live on July 25th. I'm here based in hot, hazy, and humid. Well, it's not that humid, just hot. Toronto today. And as always, on most Sunday afternoons at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we do Black Canada Talking, which is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their takes and POVs on stories that are of importance to them. And as I said a few weeks ago, now we're going bi-weekly with our panel, and three-fourths of them are with us right now. So we just want to introduce our panel as always. First up, we've got Elle Jones from the East. What is going on, Elle?
Nothing much. I'm tired because I was up following the gymnastics scores.
Oh, yes. And nope. How's the U.S. doing?
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Well, the Russians actually beat them in qualifications by more than a point.
Wow.
Or Jordan, unfortunately, had a terrible meet and fell a bunch of times. And Simone was actually as bad as she's ever been, but she still came first all around and made all 4 event finals. But she had errors on like 3 or 4 events. So they were rough. And right now, if they go like that in team final, the Russians will win. But hopefully they, get it together, I guess, especially Simone. There's a lot of pressure on her, obviously. And Jordan's mom is going to jail after the Olympics. So you can only imagine the other little Black girl's mom is going to prison when this finishes. So you can only imagine the pressure on her. So, they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders. But
okay.
And Canada didn't make team final, by the way.
Well,
Canada. And we didn't make team final.
Well, they're doing better than their men's basketball team. That's a whole other conversation. But other than that, you're good?
I'm good. Yeah, just really, really tired.
Okay. No problem. Next up, Sarah Ayongo from Ottawa. Sarah, how are you?
Actually, greetings from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, ici au Québec. Je suis au Québec, de l'autre côté de la rive. I'm well. I'm wearing my 68 Olympics shirt for this discussion because we're going to talk about the politics around the Olympics. But I haven't yet found anything to stay up late for in the Olympics. Sorry, Elle. Even the gymnastics is not making me do away with my beauty sleep. I start really following when it's track and field because that's when my Kenyans, I am Kenyan, some Canadians maybe, and a lot of Jamaicans are going to be competing. So that's when I start watching the games. But otherwise I'm well and not as excited about these games as I should be, given the context, but we'll discuss.
All right, good stuff. And Cesar from Ottawa. What's going on, Cesar? You are on mute.
That's what happens when Warren isn't here.
Well, there we go.
No.
Warren is saving your bacon.
Timing. Timing, you came on time. As I just called you in. No, thank you, everyone. I'm very well. Pleasure to be here. Lots of things going on. We're doing great work. I'm blocked on my main account on Facebook, meaning I'm doing great work, of course. So yeah, glad to be here.
All right, good stuff. And like he comes in, Mr. Warren Clark, what's going on?
Hi, how's everyone?
Doing fine. How are you doing?
It's been hectic. It's been crazy. But I'm hanging in. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Doing fine. Great to have you as always. Good to have the family intact. So let's get at it. Let's go after it. Let's talk about these Tokyo Olympics that I haven't really watched.
Okay.
I know who wants to talk about whether political or non-political side of the Tokyo
Well,
Olympics.
I'll start just a whole bunch of trivia because I'm an Olympics fiend or fanatic or whatever you want to call it. Just so people know, the games have been held in Japan before. This actually is the 4th Olympic Games taking place in Japan. Of course, I don't know if some people remember Tokyo. I don't think anybody on this panel is old enough to remember Tokyo. In '64, that was Summer Olympics. Then there were 2 Winter Olympics in '72, Sapporo and Nagano. In 1998, that one I remember, the '98 one. And interestingly, Japan was supposed to host the 1940 Summer Olympics, but they pulled out due to
the Second
World War. That's right, the Second World War. So yeah, so there you go. So the opening ceremony, I mean, all the symbolism there, like we can fill up quite some time about the elements that were put in. Some of the things that stuck out to me, besides Naomi Osaka lighting the cauldron right at the end, that's always sort of the highlight of the whole thing. And then all the hateration she got after that, because people saying, wait, what? You're representing Japan and what is this? And you're not, we're revoking your black card and just some stupidness like that on the part of some black people. And then, of course, Americans and Haitians going, wait, what? I thought you were Haitian. Like your dad is Haitian. What is, anyway. So there's that. And then, of course, there is the remembrance, the segment where Thomas Bach asked that they have that in memoriam segment, and where they highlighted the murder of the Israeli athletes back in 1972. And this is after, in 2012, at the London Games, they decided against doing it at that time. And even in previous Olympics, the Black September massacre was not mentioned. And just the image, the image of that, and then the huge Israeli delegation that walked in. And then already at the beginning of the games, there is an athlete from a Middle Eastern or Arab country who refused to compete against an Israeli in one of the disciplines. So the politics already is like right out the gate, right? But a 3/4 empty stadium, and then the whole thing around a few delegations where the entire delegation had no masks on. So you can just imagine people watching who are, under mask mandates and this and that still, even with the vaccination campaign underway. And then all these, entire delegations completely masked, and then, a bunch of them unmasked. So already the controversy there. So I'll start there.
I'll go next, I guess, because we're probably the 2 Olympics fans in the group. I'm an Olympics fan against my better nature in that obviously I was a gymnast as a child, and also I ran cross country and track. So, like the Olympics, especially for gymnastics. But at the same time, obviously, we're all aware that the Olympics are white supremacists at their roots. So Baron de Coubertin, when he started the Olympics, it was very much supposed to be a demonstration of the white superiority of the body, very much being shown to the colonies, right? So this was known as muscular Christianity. If you ever watch Chariots of Fire, you kind of see that ideology, right? Like the man running for God and all of that. And of course, you can't run on the Sunday if you've ever watched that movie, right? And so, yeah, the idea was that you would dominate through sport and show. And this, of course, is partly due to these like white fragility fears of like cosmopolitanism, right? So they're like, the bigger the world got and the more they colonized people, the more people from the colonies came into England. They were all scared, particularly of like Jewish people or like mixed race Indian people. You wouldn't know that they weren't white. And then they would like, maybe you might end up dating them and having a kid with them. And now what, right? So it's all like these fears. So they were trying to like reconstitute the white body in particular ways. It also has to do with like the war in South Africa, like all these different things that are going on, right? As they go to war. So that's the origins. And when you look at the original sports, it's all military sports. It's like fencing, like the pentathlon. So it was really to demonstrate their power over us. And they never thought that obviously we as people, as African people, would be able to match this. So they used to say that, like, you know, one-on-one, they may have the ability to be physical sometimes, but they can't play like team sports because they can't strategize, they can't think, they don't have leadership, you know, they don't have these qualities. So there's all these, like, when the West Indian cricket team, for example, beats England at Lord's for the first time, this is a big moment, right? Because we showed that we could win as a team. The West Indies cricket team never had a black captain until like the late 60s with Worrell, right? Like before that, it was always had to be a white man, even when the team was black. So this is like embedded into the whole process, right? The Olympics, of course, obviously they clear out homeless encampments every time they come through. They build all these buildings that no one has access to instead of building housing, you know, so like when it's in Vancouver, they like cleared up the east side, they blast through sacred mountains, you know, all this stuff, while of course not bringing any resources to the people. So they're just like dreadful, you know, 1984, they made all kinds of gang laws for the gangs in Los Angeles. Like every time it's awful. Like, so it's like a white supremacist spectacle essentially, but it's also, if you like sports, you know, and then of course I like gymnastics. And of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And Larry Nassar like molesting all the kids and the abuse. So, you know, you're watching something that really in your better nature, you're like, I should not be watching this, but at the same time cannot stop myself. So yeah, I mean, and then of course with gymnastics, like there continues to be anti-Black racism within gymnastics. The head of the FIG has said stuff like Black girls mature at different rates and like they have different bodies, and made like sexualized comments about Black bodies. They have a lot of racist comments about the Chinese gymnasts in particular as well. Like white girls can, you know, what they call European line in gymnastics. They want European line, which means skinny and white. So if you're like muscular and Black, they score you down. Like all of that's going on. So I'm like, I know all of this. Japan doesn't want them there. They have a terrible vaccine rollout. So people really are like at risk of infection. And like you said, you know, athletes are like running around the village unmasked and stuff, which I don't really blame them for, because like people get mad about the mask. I'm like, aren't you bleeding and sweating and throwing up on the equipment altogether? Like, you know, the whole thing's unsafe, you know. But yeah, and then of course all the Black girls are out. I'm just waiting for Simone to get COVID or something, and they'll knock her out because, you know, they kept out Sha'Carri for smoking weed. Then they kept out those two runners because they said they were men. They didn't hit the testosterone limit. Also, they were from where, Botswana? Then Castor, of course, Semenya from
South Africa.
Yeah. Was out. So like they just kind of went one by one through the list and found ways to like get rid of Black women in this Olympics. So I don't know what we're watching. There's no crowds. Like the gymnastics, like people are falling. Everyone except Russia is like a disaster and falling all over the place because no one's competed. Like I don't know what's happening, but yeah, I mean it's always hard, right? Like this is always a thing, right? That we live in a world where like our pleasures and desires don't always match our politics. So I'm like, I should be marching, like, you know, no Olympics while there's no housing, you know, but I like gymnastics, so I'm a hypocrite. That's my thoughts.
Gentlemen, are you watching? Do you care? Your thoughts?
You want to go ahead, Warren?
Yeah, sure. I am watching the U.S. men's basketball team who's doing poorly at the moment. But in terms of the politics that are rampant within the Olympics, I think, Elle, you were touching on it. I'm just going to echo a few things you're mentioning. You know, we know that the Olympics, you know, the Tokyo Committee and also the Olympic Committee was against any protests. It seems that they're allowing, you know, some types of demonstrations, such as, you know, some Black athletes or African athletes have put the fist in the air at different demonstrations as they've done. I think it was the Australian team has put up an Indigenous flag to show their solidarity. So I think it's respectfully said, because there's more work to be done, obviously, when it comes to addressing the Black lives or, you know, African descent and liberation within this world, this colonized world. But there's been some headway in terms of, you know, how is the Olympics moving in the direction it shows a bit of solidarity. Doesn't give them a complete pass, but it's more than what we've seen in others in sports forums. That's for certain. Even though some people are put on the Black Lives Matter shirts, and still Black athletes are being oppressed and Black communities are being oppressed in America. So, you know, that's on that front. You know, I think, you know, like any other sports, when it comes to Black bodies, this is another example of how Black people are being exploited. I think capitalism runs rampant within the Olympics. I think a lot of the athletes are not even getting paid enough unless you are a Kevin Durant or one of those NBA basketball players. So I think a lot of black athletes are being exploited for their talents. I think that's something that we should be all focusing on as well, right? And one of the things I'll segue to is LeBron James. Respectfully, he just hit $1 billion in net worth, and you think about these things like, wait, we've got athletes, we've got people who know the sport inside out, who have the capital, and yet we can't establish our own league. And it's when you think about it, folks like Ice Cube, who's not even an athlete, is taking a chance with the 3-on-3. I'm not sure if people are watching that 3-on-3, but he's there taking a chance on that. So, I think, all in all, like, this is just another moment of exploitation of black bodies. And I think a lot of black folks don't even realize. And if they realize, they're just doing it to get a paycheck, right? So that's where I'll stop right there. Thanks.
Thank you. So, on a light note, just to start, I will kind of continue on what Warren was saying, talking about how this morning I did watch the U.S. men's basketball team. Definitely remind us that they are not a dream team. They're just individual players. And it's not that it's to be mocked that they lost to France, because now France, as other teams, have players in the NBA, but you can clearly see this is the same U.S. Basketball team that lost an exhibition to Nigeria and Australia, and very logically to a French team that has top players. On a more serious note regarding the Olympics, I am kind of like Al, because effectively the Olympics are, I don't want to say a celebration of white supremacy. We kind of have to be careful, because a lot of black people take pride in the achievements of our brothers and sisters at the Olympics. But if you're honest, not only the Olympics began as an alternative to warfare among European nations, and by the way, such is also the logic behind football, aka soccer, in Europe. Instead of making war, let's compete on the field. So a celebration of the body. If you want to understand where that goes to, you have to go back 2,500 years ago in terms of the competition between Sparta and Athens at the Olympics. That's where it starts. But at the same time, always you see the social issues and the political issues of our times being reflected at the Olympics, because for like 2 weeks or a month, it becomes a macrocosm. So to give you a clear example, Sarah gave the example of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which still comes back and forth depending on the circumstances. You know how I feel about that. There's anti-black racism in both places. So for me, it's a clear cut. I support every black person there. But how many African athletes are going to escape going back to the country and claim refugee status? I don't know how safe that would be to do in Japan, because in Japan, it's not like in Europe. So I just want, and I think someone feel free to correct me, I think there's already one African player who had gone missing and got, he tried to claim refugee status. Japan is not exactly the land where you want to try to pull that calculated move. The last thing I will say regarding the Olympics on that topic is regarding a South Korean channel. I don't know if anyone has heard. The name of the channel is MBC, and that channel has become notorious in Korea because, notorious in South Korea, forgive me, because what they did, it was not exclusive to black athletes, not to African nations, but I will stick to the black. So what they would do is that, so as you have the opening ceremony and you have, the country with the flag coming in, I mean, it's as ridiculous as it's funny as it's kind of shocking. They would basically take, so this is the country, and they would affiliate it with a stereotype that goes to the country. Italy, pizza. Ukraine, Chernobyl. Haiti, the Haiti, they basically listed Haiti in terms of ongoing political instability. Like, instead of talking about the delegation and, we got Al Jones representing this country and she has done great things here, just as Warren has done. No. It's like, forget the athletes. This is the bad or the stereotype about the country. Sweden, the country of welfare, and they made a typo in the writing, so it came out as a Korean dish. Regarding our black nations, yes, regarding our black nations, Haiti, political instability, and if I recall from my reading back in 2008, they had described Chad. So you see, understand the hypocrisy. It's not the first time they do this. In 2008, for the Beijing Olympics, Chad had been described as the dark heart of Africa, aka the darkest Sudan black type of thing, and Zimbabwe as the land of inflation, in the political and economical. So for me, Olympics also, it's always a reflection of the political, the geopolitical, easy to remember, yes, Israel, Palestine, USA, Russia, but anytime Iran plays a Western nation, etc., etc. So
yeah, I'd like to add, the politics around the Olympics. It's more than just the politics that the international, the global audience sees on the podium, in the field, in the ring, or whatever. And by the way, Al, in terms of protest, after Bach had said absolutely no, none of that, they had to backtrack. So basically, you're allowed to show whatever your political view before and after the competition, but not on the podium. So you can't do this thing with, 68. You can't do this thing. You can't Black Lives Matter on the podium. You can't do like the, I think it was a shot putter or the field event. You can't turn away. Yeah, you can't turn away from, no, you can't do any of that. So that's that. But what
would they really do? Because they're going to kick you out of the village, but you have to leave the village anyway, so you might as well do it.
And on the podium is where it counts, because that's where you've got the 6 billion eyeballs that are, fixated and looking at, who's on the podium. However, just very quickly, the political dimension in African countries, we have dynamics like the tribalism, like who got on the track team. Even though they didn't have the fastest time, you have nepotism on there, you have tribalism on there, you have so-and-so who is known to sympathize with this political party that's in power, as opposed to the actual person you should have sent to maybe get a medal, all of that sort of thing. Then you also have, somebody earlier talked about the commercial imperative, because, I've been having arguments all week about people, about why the hell even bother if you're not going to bring in all those tourist dollars with full stadiums and pools and gymnasiums, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they spend all this money on it. There's all this advertising, blah, blah, blah. It's an opportunity to market Tokyo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But another commercial imperative that we don't hear enough about is all of the corruption around the International Olympic Committee. We've had people go to jail. There's we've had people indicted. You've had people involved in trials, etc. And then when it comes to the National Olympic Committees, you've had those scandals as well. I mean, I know our own, the one in Kenya. I mean, you keep hearing of the officials who disappear with. Yeah, the officials who disappear with stipends, and it's not just about fugitive athletes, the ones who ask for asylum. And often, by the time they're asking for asylum, you will find that some of those athletes will have been the ones who have been deprived of stipends. Some even may be kicked out of hotel rooms because they couldn't pay, because the money the government had allotted for the athletes who are the actual stars of that whole show, the money isn't there because it's being eaten up by the official entourage. And I don't know if you saw in the parade of athletes or whatever, so many of those, so many of the countries are presented by officials, a lot of teams having more officials in the entourage than actual athletes. Why? Because it pays. You get a travel stipend, you get the daily stipend, etc. So that needs to be dealt with in a more forceful way. But, I'm not going to hold my breath. So that's it. That's all I'll say.
Well, a perfect example is the case of Guinea. How Guinea could not afford to participate, but at the last minute came in because there's always issues of money and corruption involved. And this is part of the reason why, if I go back to the example that Elle was talking about Vancouver and the Olympics, I go to Brazil 2016, the Olympics, more often than not, and when I say more often than not, right here in Canada, we just look at Montreal and the Stade Olympique, the Olympic Stadium. More often than not, the Olympics become a financial pitfall for the society that hosts them. It's not the commoners, even in Japan, rich Japan, whatever, developed Japan, it's not the commoners that benefit from the Olympics. Good for the athletes, of course, especially if they do get paid, but it's really for those at the top of the financial food chain will make even more money of the Olympics. And that's why even you look at the context of COVID and variants rising in Japan, why couldn't they not cancel the games? Too many billions invested, and notably regarding insurances. So we may have what could be called a Tokyo variant coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to add before we move on?
I'm good.
Yeah,
go Kenya, go Jamaica.
There you go.
That's it.
Coming up, August 1st of this year, Emancipation Day will be officially observed across Canada for the first time. Panel, what are your thoughts?
Who? Oh.
Panel.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm the one who brought it up, right? And so for those I know there are people from the United States who are tuned in. And so you all celebrate Juneteenth. Here we have Emancipation Day because the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 ended slavery in the British Empire on August 1st. Freeing over 800,000 enslaved Africans and their descendants in parts of the Caribbean, Africa, South America, and Canada. However, it wasn't complete freedom. It was partial freedom, right? And that's one of the criticisms that a lot of people are leveling against this national observance. So let's see, in Canada, according to a Quebec historian, Marcel Trudel, there were about 4,200 enslaved people in the area known as Nouvelle-France, which is, Quebec over here, and later in Upper and Lower Canada. And approximately 2/3 of these enslaved people were indigenous, and 1/3 were of African descent. And so first of all, I'd like to applaud Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, who had tried for, I'd say, the better part of 2 years to get this national observance done. And also Rosemary Sadler. Nobody talks enough about that lady and the people who helped her push for Ontario and also helped to get this national observance as well. I'm from the African continent. I do not have an immediate connection to the Middle Passage experience. To my knowledge, there isn't anybody in my family tree, although there was the slave trade along the Indian Ocean and the coast of Kenya. There's actually a people who are a byproduct of the enslavement of Africans by Arabs, not Europeans, not the Portuguese, by Arabs. But for me, I think a national observance is important because it is an opportunity to remind all Canadians of that particular aspect of history and to remind people that we need to redouble our efforts to dismantle all of the institutional racism that has flowed from that awful Black Holocaust that went on for hundreds of years. So for me, as a continental African, it's important that national observance because I'm part of a continuum of Black experience on Turtle Island that includes the enslavement and the subsequent emancipation of persons of African descent. I'll start there.
All right, good stuff. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yes, I'll go next.
Go ahead, El.
My mom is from Trinidad, where obviously Emancipation Day has been celebrated for a long time, as it is across the Caribbean. My mom always tells me the story, which like every time she cries with laughter, she tells me the story at least 3 times a year. That what would it have been? So her mother remembers her great aunt or something singing. So when Emancipation came, she was like 4 or 5 and she was in the street and she was singing Emancipation Day gone past, poor old massa gonna eat long grass. Like, in other words, like you're not gonna be able to farm when you don't have us, right? Like that was what they were singing. So it was Emancipation Day gone past, poor old massa gonna eat long grass. And I guess the mistress came running out and was like, you'll eat long grass, you'll eat long grass, and sort of like freaking out on her. And like got so mad. And my mom just thinks this is like the funniest story. And she tells this story all the time. So I grew up on this story, but of course that shows how close it is. This would be my mother's like great aunt or something, so we're talking like living generations, that remember the end of enslavement. I don't know. Yeah. I don't believe in the state. So, like anything that's like state, like sanctioned celebrations, I always want to side eye, but if there's other people get months, so, like there's no reason why we can't have markers for our history as well. So it represents something about within the state, what is our role? However, of course, emancipation itself is a political act and an ongoing act. And Sarah was talking about this too. People are like, but we're not emancipated. And we're not. I mean, Sadia Hartman calls this the afterlife of slavery, right? And I think, part of this idea, I mean, even when the British end the slave trade in 1807, slavery continues until 1837. And of course, they end the trade largely, one, because of the US, like basically troubling their boats. And of course, Haiti has a big role in it. It's like Haiti's up in flames. Like people always want to leave this out, but Haiti, 1802, end of slavery, 1807, end of the slave trade. What happened? Africans got free and sent up Haiti in flames. And then they're like, crap, if we keep bringing these Africans over from Africa, because that was the fear, right? That the ones that coming straight from Africa still know themselves and can organize and know the terrain and can go up and do marinage and all of that, right? So this is where they were like, let's stop bringing them in. We'll save the whole shipping route thing and we can just, like breed them. So that was the next 30 years. And that's the only time, for example, when they started incentivizing women having children. People always think we had so many kids during slavery. We didn't. It wasn't incentivized. It was cheaper at the other end. Like go pay a gun, get a bunch of Africans, drown, kill, disease the ones that you don't have, the ones that are left, work them 10 years until they die, go get more. Like it wasn't like an investment. They weren't trying to keep us as long-term workers. And it's only when the trade ends that then they start being like, okay, like have kids and try to incentivize that. And then eventually it ends in 1837. I say all that because the stroke of a pen certainly does not end our unfreedom. At a point where we were supposedly the slave trade was over, we were still slaves. What did they do? Bring in indentures. They did that in Nova Scotia too, right? When we came up here as loyalists, they essentially re-enslaved everybody through indentures. And this continues now, right? The entire legal, social, and economic arrangement of these countries is based off slavery. The credit system, of course, comes from slavery. The entire financial banking system cannot be separated from slavery. Even things like domestic arrangements were very much influenced by enslavement, right? It was an entire legal, cultural, social sphere. And it doesn't go away, and it hasn't gone away. And of course, we like to say that, and this is like the debate on critical race theory, right? This is like literally what critical race theory is telling us. This thing that, the GOP have tried to make into it's just white hating. This is exactly the basic insight of CRT is you can't just have civil rights and inclusion into a system without looking at what are the roots of that system. And this is, of course, people have called like the afterlife of slavery that we continue to live out through police shootings, through the prison system, through the immigration system. We're going to talk about borders in a minute, through all these other things. So it's really important, I think, for us to always keep our mind as we celebrate, and we are entitled as Black people to recognition. We're also entitled to days where we like relax, and you don't have to be hardcore all day every day. If we want to have a barbecue and drink with our friends on that day, we can. We're entitled just like everybody else, but we have to remember why we're here and what the sacrifice was and how much further there is to go. I also want to shout out Black August, of course, which is being proposed for many years by radical Black people as an alternative to Black History Month, with nothing like wrong with Black History Month. But Black History Month now, of course, is very institutionalized and often focused on like the first person to do this, the great person to do this within the system. August is, of course, a month that includes Nat Turner's rebellion, the Attica uprising, the first enslaved people brought to Virginia in 1609, I think it is. The Jamaican, one of the Jamaican rebellions is there, one of the like Haitian rebellion, like everything's kicking off in August. Plus, I think Du Bois dies in August. Like there's a ton of people like born or dying in August. So people have proposed it as an alternate revolutionary month to Black History Month, a month that really focuses on the specific question of liberation, beginning with Emancipation Day and then moving through the month, which has often ended in prison strikes. So it was actually the Black prisoners in like 72 in the jails and prisons in California that were beginning to talk about this. And interestingly, it was BLM was the acronym. I can't remember what it stood for, some life movement, something. I can't remember what it was, but Black Liberation Movement, maybe. But they used the acronym BLM at that time in the 70s in order to gather this kind of radical thinking. So out of the prisons, out of the jails, really came the idea of this month for those of us living in unfreedom to really focus our minds on freedom, how we get there, who brought us here, what the sacrifice is, and the strategizing we need to do from our history to move forward. I talked a really long time, sorry. Okay, next.
No problem. Any gentlemen want to add at all in regards to Emancipation Day? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I was more of a listener there, but I think it's good to see that there's many organizations in Ontario that I've come to know are celebrating Emancipation Day more so than previous years. It shows that those who are in positions of leadership within many of the nonprofit organizations I've come to know, and even some of the for-profit organizations, that they're taking this emancipation celebration, more widely within organizations and actually taking a moment to reflect and celebrate. So I just want to acknowledge that. Niagara Positive Living, whose organization I know very well, is doing that, for example. So one of the things that I'm always thinking about, how do we give it back? How do we give this information for young? How are they going to mobilize these ideas, these thoughts, these celebrations for years to come? So I think we're starting to see that with some organizations. I think when you talk about Emancipation Day and you talk about in terms of in our general audience, a lot of people don't even know the history of it. So I think we just got to continue having conversations about what this means, particularly from just what it means for Black or African descent people, and then just keep pushing the narrative. So I'm gonna just add that little caveat. I think Elle and Sarah added a lot of context. So thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Cesar, anything you want to add?
Just one little thing. As a Pan-Africanist, I always support any day of reflection and consciousness for my people worldwide. As a continental African, I am, as Sarah here, it is not for me to criticize or anything else, such as day as Juneteenth or Emancipation Day. However, I would just want to remind our Black people in the US, as in Canada, as anywhere in the world, when they have a day of reflection regarding the atrocities of the past, let us not remain in the reflection, in the prayer, and in the symbolic. Let us always push for concrete changes. As Brother Warren talked about, how do we translate the symbolic day to concrete education for our youth, but also concrete actions for our communities? Because that's what we really, truly, and absolutely need. So yes to Emancipation Day, as to Juneteenth, etc., etc.
Okay, we got. Oh,
excuse me.
Go ahead. You froze for a second.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have no clue what's going on with the internet today. But
okay.
Yes, my daughter is half African American, so absolutely, you will always have me supporting such a day as Juneteenth. As for regarding my daughter, Emancipation Day, I live in Canada. I do have a Canadian passport, but let us always go beyond the symbolism for our youth and concrete actions for our communities. So, yeah.
And just to end, speaking of youth, I'd like to really applaud Jair Joseph and the West Indian Youth Association of Ottawa organizing the first ever in the history of Ottawa flag raising of the Pan-African flag at Ottawa City Hall. It will fly in front of City Hall all day for the first time ever. I mean, we've had Emancipation Day events by our Caribbean associations, but that Pan-African flag has never, ever been flown in front of any institution in the city, let alone City Hall. So I'd like to applaud them. And they are that next generation who are heeding your call to action, Warren, and taking it upon themselves to educate themselves and their peers on not just Emancipation Day and Black history in Canada, but also Caribbean history and culture as well, because we have a lot of our young West Indians, you know, sort of growing up, not really sort of anchored, other than the food and some music, not really anchored in the history and the actual culture of origin of the West Indies. So I'll end there.
Okay, let's move it on to the next conversation piece. The Canadian government regularizing the state of undocumented immigrants. Elle and Sarah, you brought this up before we went live, so you're leading this conversation today, so keep it going.
Well, basically, it's because I, this afternoon, as I was walking home from the Byward Market, I ran into a huge protest, sort of getting ready to walk down Sussex Drive past the U.S. Embassy to Parliament Hill. And yeah, these people protesting the fact that Ottawa is not doing a good enough job of regularizing asylum seekers who worked in healthcare during the pandemic. Because remember, at one point, a lot of PSWs and medical staff were just quitting out of exhaustion or just not wanting to, you know, themselves be contaminated, etc. And they were really short. And we had all of these migrants coming across the U.S. Border who agreed to come and work, especially here in Quebec, in our seniors' homes. So, you know, after they sacrificed their lives like that, and you know, the Canadian government has talked about, oh, heroes of the pandemic, well, these are the heroes of the pandemic. They just happen to be a whole bunch of mostly black and brown people who need to get status so that they can actually now start their lives over. And who knows, a lot of them may become the PSWs who are going to help us here in Quebec deal with we still have a shortage of people in the long-term care sector. So I'm just at a loss as to how, you know, all of a sudden the Canadian government is, well, you know what? I think this should be an election issue because, as we all know, everybody's getting ready for a federal election, and don't believe the hype. The Governor General is being sworn in tomorrow. She was named very, very quickly for a reason, and all of us should have this asylum seeker program regularization issue as an election issue.
Okay, who wants to follow up on that in regards to that subject?
I mean, I guess I can add a couple of things. So, of course, the majority of our farming as well in Canada is done by migrant workers. There's a good documentary, El Contrado, that shows the migrant farming in Ontario, that you can see what that looks like. And for a long time, people have been calling for status for all, right? That the first right is the right to even have rights, you know, so we can't even talk about human rights until we're in a context where people have rights. The first right you don't have is if you don't have the right of citizenship, you literally have nothing, right? You can be deported at any point. Your healthcare can be stripped. Even if you have PR, it can be stripped from you, right? So when we sort of talk about all the ways that we experience our rights, we don't tend to think about nation in that, I think, because it just seems like a given, but of course borders are artificial and we created them, and capital can cross them, of course. When Walmart wants to come here, they can cross. When Amazon wants to come here, the cities compete, and they not only roll out the red carpet and don't make them pay taxes, but they'll build extra roads to them, they'll do whatever. But when people want to come here, suddenly there's a barrier, right? So this is not unusual that Canada's economy, particularly on farms and yes, in like healthcare, has continued to run on workers who have no path to citizenship. So what we call a temporary farm worker, these people are returning over decades and they have absolutely no path to citizenship at all. It's not like, okay, if you come for 10 years, then you can apply. Like the literal deal is you are not applying. When you come, your papers are taken by your employer. If you look on the farms, many times they're living 12, 20 people to one room, covered in mold, no place to really shower or go to the toilet, living on the farm. You have no escape. They take your papers and stuff. You have no way to go and move on your own. If you want to move, you have to apply for a permit to move, which is like very difficult to get. Like if you want to go to a different farm, and usually you have to show evidence of abuse, they can deport you at any time, and they do. So if you complain, if you get raped by like the person who wants you out of the way, they can send you home any minute. You literally have no rights. People are injured all the time. It's back-breaking work, and they do everything they can to prevent you from having any contact. So out here, like a lot of people are out Truro way, like about an hour from Halifax, a lot of the farms are. When they come into Truro, they're watched by armed guards. The Black community there for a long time in Truro begged, like, can they just come to church? So finally they let them, but put guards in between so nobody could like pass them anything or talk to them. Like it is slavery. It is migrant. This is a new slavery, like trade in sex and work is like enslavement, right? For women, of course, under these domestic programs. So because we didn't want to give universal childcare, we invented, the domestic program instead, so that wealthy white middle-class women who can go out to work can like hire a nanny. And the same situation, your employer holds your papers. You're in that living in the house like 24/7. So your time is abused. People get raped by like the men in the house. It's awful. And we think of those conditions as things that happen in like Dubai and stuff, because they do happen to like a lot of Ethiopian, Nigerian women, but they happen in Canada too. And these are largely like women from the Caribbean, women from the Philippines, women across Africa. And you have like literally no rights at all in these scenarios. And this is in Canada. And our Liberal government only ever wants to talk about respectable immigration. This is like one of the issues we had when we were fighting the deportation of Abdul, right? When we had a Black immigration minister from Somalia as well, but nobody wanted to, this is the issue that people don't want to deal with, right? They want to think about, well, discourse on immigrants, because people, and also people who are immigrants are vulnerable and scared, right? Because most people are racialized, you're like Muslim and you're Black, and like people don't want to be seen as a criminal element, or, people aren't contributing. So we lean very hard on this like discourse of, well, immigrants contribute to the economy, we're better educated, we're all these things. But then that, of course, leaves out our migrant brothers and sisters who aren't the doctors and the scientists coming in, right? So we create this discourse, and then the Liberal government is like, oh, yeah, we want to give them money for like settlement for the good ones of you to come. But then we want to exploit the ones of you who are working class and not give you anything. And nobody wants to speak up because we don't want to say things like status for all when we're trying to get our own immigration statuses ourselves. So it's really a case of a lack of solidarity, I think, among the middle classes, particularly of Black people, towards our working class brothers and sisters, and we don't know what's going on. Also, I think there's a knowledge gap, but yeah, I mean, this has always been the problem. And like when we fight, not so much those kind of deportations, a lot of like criminality deportations, and it's really, really difficult, right? Because even our own people don't want to step up because they're like, well, let's not mess it up. If we get the idea that like we commit crimes, and they might come for us next. So like we can't afford. Like I understand where this comes from. Like we can't afford to advocate for this stuff because we're just trying to make it, but it's a huge failure. And like we've never pushed the Liberal government to do status for all, which seems insane in the way that defunding the police seems insane, in the way that, all these things seem insane, but are really just basic things. If capital can move across borders, people can move across borders.
Gentlemen, you want to add?
Sorry, I'm so long-winded today.
But you're tired.
I'm not going to add there. I'm just going to leave that there. Thank you.
I'm just going to go very quickly because I have no clue why I have some bad internet. I would just say that, Canada is a country built on white supremacy, and part of white supremacy is capitalism through globalization, despite all the talks of freedoms and democracy. This is our very same nation where we have, yes, undocumented migrants, as Elle was saying.
Oh,
very well paid. Majority of those workers are from South America, we do have people who are also exploited. Being Black, you get to work in the hospital to help to being paid what you should be paid, etc., etc. And at the same time, we have the fact of this country that now will have to deal very quickly with the fate of those Afghans who helped them in their invasion campaign where they went to assist the United States. Yes, we can talk about whatever morality, bringing freedom. Injured will need to come here to Canada for their well-being, but how will they be treated? So we need to always look at the Canadian postcard image and look at the back of that postcard. Yes, Indigenous reserves, I hate that term, the conditions about Indigenous is still safe, but ongoing heterosexism / homophobia, and we have an issue of undocumented migrants that the vast majority of Canadians don't know about.
I just want to very quickly add something. I told you how I came across that huge protest that was getting ready to start walking down. And then I kept walking over the bridge, and there was a young lady who had someone who's an out-of-town guest or whatever. And so she asked me, "Oh, what's going on?" And I said, "Well, it's a protest for the rights of migrant workers and asylum seekers, trying to get status, etc." And then she turns to the guy that she's with and she goes, "Well, anyway, at least in Canada, they have it better here." Whoa. Okay, my neck just snapped around, and I was walking ahead of them, and I turned around and I said, "Actually, no." And I started giving them part of the list that Elle just gave about the terrible living conditions and working conditions and the personal, the violation of their bodies and rapes and all of that kind of stuff. So that whole "we're better than the US" thing, yeah, people need to be better educated on what is actually being done in their name. Because that's another thing. We need to stop acting like, oh yeah, this is outside. It's not. This is the Canadian government acting in your name and using your tax dollars, if you please, your tax dollars, okay, to decide not to give status to these people who deserve status, especially after they helped so many of our long-term care homes here in Quebec. If it weren't for those people, I don't know how many more of our seniors would have been dead. And I mentioned the American part because Serena Wills is in here learning a lot from you, Elle, I'm pretty sure. And so I'd like to send a shout out to Serena and thank her for listening and taking interest, because a lot of these people came from across the border from the United States, thinking Canada was going to be better for them, only to now be confronted with the reality that, yeah, no, actually, Canada can be just as racist. Just saying.
Well, just very quickly, in Manitoba, where my sister lives, she does law, so they go down to the border when people are crossing, and in winter, of course, a lot of people were walking up from the States. This is in Trump, and like Black. Remember all the stories about like Ghanaians and stuff, and they'd be like walking in like neck deep snow and like losing like limbs and everything to frostbite, and the people would lock their barns. So like people are coming through. And instead of being like, maybe I should like be on the lookout, maybe we should have some patrols in case some of these people are on the street. Maybe we should leave our barns open. They're literally like, let's lock everything up so these people freeze to death.
This ain't no Underground Railroad, okay? Yeah, that train done left a long time ago. So the whole romanticizing of that Underground Railroad and whatever, no.
All right, let's move on. Our last conversation topic, and I live in Toronto. I'm the only Torontonian out of everyone here that is in different areas of Canada. I know Warren is in Toronto a lot too, but a very interesting situations going on in Toronto this week. A number of homeless people that were living in different parts of the city in tents were aggressively removed by the Toronto police. And it's caused a lot of stir here in Toronto. I'm surprised it hasn't caused more uproar in the nation, but that's not a surprise because obviously everyone has control of their own news outlets. But for those who did see the story, what were your reactions to them? Cesar, you better go first because I know you've got to leave us fairly quick.
Thank you. Thank you. No, my reaction is very much as a follow-up of the previous story regarding undocumented migrants. It's again the force of capitalism and the erasure of
It's internet.
those who don't fit in logic in terms of clean parks, safe neighborhoods, etc.
Okay.
It just killed him.
Oh,
He's back.
Am I off mute? Or do you hear me?
yes.
Now we do.
Am I still being heard?
So start from the beginning.
Okay, so no, I get the capitalist logic in terms of clean parks, safe neighborhoods, but no, this is really there's a matter of classism involved. And there's also those society does. People don't want or don't choose to be homeless. As our great Pan-Africanist leader Nelson Mandela said, poverty is a human creation, and the solution to poverty is humans. You cannot live in a society where the rich get richer and surprise yourself that there are people you need to employ police state violence to basically remove them. It's a failure of society. It's not a failure of the individual who are in those parks. It's a failure of the city. And Mayor John Tory should think about addressing the issue from a different lens than I will leave it at that.
Okay. So Cesar, I'm going to suggest that you probably log out because I know you have to leave at the top of the hour. And plus with your technical challenges, I think it's best that we let you go now. So take care of yourself. All right. Next up, who wants to comment on it next? Who
Warren.
Warren, you haven't talked.
Yeah, Warren.
You're on mute, Warren.
You're still on mute.
If the two of you want to go, you guys on a roll. I don't want to stop you guys, you folks. Sorry, you ladies' way of speaking. I'm learning.
But Warren, I'm interested in your perspective as a social worker, as someone who has that social work background.
And respectfully said, I'm not a social worker. I'm sociology.
Sociologist. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Sorry. I take that back.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We make mistakes. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I think this is thanks for bringing this up, Dr. Vibe, something I've been following myself, but this is capitalism, this is neoliberalism, this is a way to continue gentrifying Toronto. It's a way to also displace people. And it goes to show that, we are now moving into times where if you're not of a middle class or higher upper class in that city, then you don't belong. That's just what it is. This is the world that we were warned about by Wendy Brown and and I'm reading a lot of neoliberalism stuff now for many years, and we didn't take heed. And now we have people who are on the ground and want to be in solidarity. You're going to get your head bashed in. I'm going to call a spade at this point. Police have now these special powers that they're demonstrating that they have. I don't think this should be a shock to anyone. I am not shocked. Dr. Vibe just mentioned, Ottawa. I think that's going to come to Ottawa very soon. I think the only reason it hasn't gotten here is because the proximity to the federal government, the proximity to provincial and municipal at the same time, compared to Toronto. You got to think what Toronto is. Toronto is a money-making city. Doug Ford himself has said Ontario is the economic engine of Canada. Not even considering Montreal and BC, which is quite weird to me, but needless to say, that's what the perception is of Ontario, more so Toronto. They're going to want to upkeep that image, when the things that, regardless of how much money they take from taxes, they're always going to say that it's not enough. And they're going to look at it from a perspective that we need to, recuperate money's lost during the pandemic. And this is what they're doing. They're saying, listen, we need tourism to come back. We need people to feel like they can go in the streets and, walk around. I wouldn't be surprised if they start raiding in certain, marginalized areas or low-income areas. I wouldn't be surprised, but that's going to happen, right? They're not going to want shootings on downtown Toronto. They're not going to want the image of homeless people, respectfully said, in Toronto. They want the image of Toronto to look clean, fresh, and somewhere to visit. Last time I was in Toronto, just walking around, the people just walking up and down downtown is remarkable. Like it felt like I was in New York, but a different vibe of New York. So I think there's a lot to consider, but I think it was Sarah, you said the train has left the building. The train has left the building. When it comes to Toronto. Scholars, myself, Elle, and whoever out there, we can talk about what's going on in Toronto. But I think, the image is already set. I think that the plan is already in motion, and I think the elite are now, capitalizing on what they want the Toronto to look like. So, and this is going to be the image of many metropolitans, like it or not. So.
I'm going to jump in here. I usually don't say a lot, but since I do live in Toronto, I think I can put in some commentary here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Toronto, that train left a long time ago. And Warren, it's very interesting how you said about the middle class. That's solely becoming an anomaly in Toronto because, we haven't even talked about just for one to afford to live in Toronto. I don't know, I don't know how much you hear about the housing prices here.
Yeah, you're also jacking up our housing prices because people can get houses there, so they're coming out here, and now our housing is up.
Exactly. So Toronto, and I was having this conversation with someone who deals in real estate this morning, and it's funny that the people want to buy houses, can't afford them, but then the builders are saying, "Wow, we've built so many houses, people can't afford them anymore, or condominiums they can't afford." So something is coming, and this is just and I'm just piggybacking on what Warren said. This is the tip of the iceberg of things that are going to come. And when we talk about middle class, that middle class doesn't include a lot of us, right? I'll just put it out here, and people can push back on anyone on the panel. We're the fortunate middle class that look like us. We know many, many people who are not of middle class who look like us. What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. There is an area in Toronto called Jane and Finch.
Yeah.
We all know it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all know about a place called Regent Park in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So I was speaking with someone the other day, a number of years ago, and for people who are watching, Regent Park was let's say a challenge area in Toronto. And basically what the government did was, goodbye. They just totally put in new condominiums, and where did those people go? Who knows? Well, the same thing is now happening in the Jane Finch area of Toronto.
Yeah.
So this is the tip of the iceberg, right? What happened with these people that were pushed out of their tents and all that, those are the people you saw. There's a whole pile of people that don't look like them. They're in the same situation, if not worse. What's going to happen with them? What is the government going to do to address them? I'm complete.
Yeah. So I forget if it was Dr. Vibe or Warren who said, it's only a matter of time before you see that in Ottawa. Hello, we're there already. I mean, I've been in the Ottawa Gatineau area since 1980, and it was during Mike Harris's time that I really now started to see a lot of our mentally ill fellow citizens and people with substance abuse problems, etc. That was when I started seeing them on the actual streets of Ottawa around the Byward Market, Rideau Street, near the Rideau Center, and all of that. Before that, we were able to hide them because there were all these halfway houses and there were facilities that where they could go. But now there's been this controversy around moving the Salvation Army. That big, I don't know if you've seen it, Warren, the huge Salvation Army building in downtown Ottawa in the Byward Market, across from a bunch of very posh condos that are totally unaffordable. They want to move now that to Vanier, which also is undergoing gentrification. I used to live in Vanier when I was a teenager, and now the working class white French Canadians who used to live there, whoop, pushed out, and now the mostly black and brown francophone newcomers who moved there because it was cheap. It was one of the cheapest areas to get housing. They're being pushed too. So this whole gentrification nation thing is going across the board. And on this side, on the Quebec side, we're also feeling sort of the contre-coup of what's going on in the GTA and in the Ottawa housing market, because people have been rushing across here trying to grab up whatever cheap housing they can get, which has driven prices up, which has pushed people further out into the countryside, and even there, housing is unaffordable. So, I mean, at what point do our cities tell developers? Because again, these developers, as we know, a lot of our municipal politicians are in bed with them. Hello, Jen Harder in Ottawa West. Yes, I'm calling your name. She had to step down from that committee, the city committee that deals with, the permits, et cetera, because of her very close ties to a well-known developer in this city. So at some point, we can't all be living in condos because we can't all afford them. And also, I'm not so sure that condos environmentally are, attractive and helpful, to the aesthetic of our neighborhoods. I saw Warren wanted to say something.
A few things. Thanks. First off, Serena, thank you for your comment. Middle class becoming obsolete. I'll just say that part. The answer is no. And Serena, if you're listening, if you want to type this in the chat, I'd like to hear your response. On average, how much people have savings? Amount of at least $10,000 in savings in their account, on average. Anybody on the panel would like to answer? How many people out of 10? Out of 10 people, how many people do you think would have at least $10,000 in their account?
3.
3 people.
And what I'm going to say, Warren, and that's regardless of color.
Yeah.
Hold generally.
On, right? So if you say 3 people, so you explain to me, or not you, Al, but generally speaking, okay, figuratively too, explain where these people are getting this money from. Let's think about this critically now, all right? People are selling themselves to get mortgages, literally, to these banks. So it's not about the developers. Developers are going to develop. That's what they're made to do. The people who are going to give these loans are the bankers, the banks. That's who we're going to give them. These people are living house poor. People are living house poor. I listened to one guy speak last month. He said he just bought a house, him and his wife. He said he had to pick up an extra job just to afford his bills.
Wow.
Think about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's only a matter of time. One of the things that's going to ruin people is people going and shopping after the pandemic. Do you know how many people are lining up to get into stores because they haven't gotten to the stores for the last year or so? Do you know how much money they're spending? The credit card companies are having a ball right now. And it's not because of the builders, it's the bankers. They are letting money go. And a lot of people, they're not talking about it because they don't want to scare people. A lot of people are not able to afford those homes. And they're foreclosing on those homes. It's happening. The only reason why it's not being talked about because it's not in mainstream media. If you Google search it, you will find it. The problem is people are trying to keep up with the Joneses. As my father said, I'll bring a father reference. You can't hang your hat higher than where you can reach it. But people are jumping to reach that top of that shelf to get what they want. Right now, as we speak, it's only going to be a matter of time. Financial literacy is one of the poorest in our Black community. I've been saying on this show from time now. You and I spoke about the loan that the Bank of the federal government. Do you know how many People don't even know how to apply for that. There was an article just the other day.
We don't want to go there right now. We can have an offline conversation. I don't want to go there right now.
I don't want to. I'm not, okay, let's not go there. But let's think about this critically. People don't even know how to apply for that loan. Let's use as an example. And when they do, some people don't know how to pay it back because it's all about.
I'm going to say some. Okay, good.
You want to go there, so I said some. Right? You said some. So we have to think about what's at stake here. Cost of living is going up, but one thing is not going up: wages.
Yeah,
they're not going up.
You know what? It's interesting you mentioned that. And I saw it on there's a gentleman named Robert Reich, who's a fairly well-known economist in the United States. So just going to refer to Serena because she's from the U.S. Do you know the federal minimum wage in the United States has not changed over the last 7 years? $7.25 an hour. So even though we're talking about Black Canada talking, I wanted to bring in some U.S. perspective there. But yeah, the wages ain't going up.
It's because of neoliberalism, folks. We live in times where it's like, you know what? You can do for yourself. You want it? Tony Montana is. The sky is yours. That's the world we live in right now. You know what? You can have a full-time job and you could be an Amazon worker. Yes, you can. You can trade on Amazon. You know, why don't you get wealth simple? I'm not bad-mouthing people who want to invest. Do your investment. You know, right now the capitalists have figured out a way that we can exploit your labor power 24/7, 7 days a week. Don't you remember the stores are closed on Sundays? Remember that?
Yes. I'm old enough to remember that. Yeah.
Stores used to be closed on Sundays.
Sunday. Mm-hmm.
Now stores are open almost at 9 o'clock at night. It's going to go back to that after the pandemic. I'm telling you.
Well, they're open. Most of them open anyways because they're online. So they're open all the time anyways, right?
There you go. You can buy it right now.
Jones, you're looking too comfortable there. You haven't said a thing.
Well, very briefly. So the Globe and Mail did a fascist editorial about this. If people want to look from a couple of days ago, where they celebrated clearing the encampments, and the comment's very instructive because what it shows you is that particularly these right-wing dudes or whoever we want to call them, they live lives so devoid of compassion that they can't even imagine a world where other people are compassionate to others. So the whole comments are filled with is paid protesters. These people get rich off this. And I'm like, you really think people are being paid to show up to get a face full of pepper spray and a baton to the face? People are doing this because they are part of this community, because they are friends with people. Because, you can't imagine that someone in a homeless encampment could have family or friends, right? Because they're seen as so sub and unhuman. And because people care about their fellow people. So I just find that always interesting, which is such a right-wing mentality, right? That's why they always say we're pulling the race card, or we're just, using, we use activism to get wealthy, because they can't actually imagine putting your body on the street for somebody else, because they would never do that. So they like to project. So the comments are really interesting. There's a super fascist editorial from Globe and Mail, who of course likes to do this kind of thing so they don't get accused of being liberal, as if anybody thought the Globe and Mail was liberal. There's actually some interesting pieces of journalism that came out, because journalists so often don't want to do their job in mainstream media. It's just do your job. But they actually did their job for once, because Mayor Tory went on, I guess, with this Mailer Alpha on CBC. And he said that, and this Mailer Alpha asked him questions. I'm looking at this picture of a knee on this person's neck. Is that okay? Oh, look, here's a picture of someone being choked out. And Tory was like, well, I haven't seen those pictures. I don't know anything about this, but I know the violence started from the protesters. So he's like, yeah, the protesters started all the violence. I heard a couple of police got injured. So one of the injuries is one of the new cops pepper sprayed himself. Everyone saw him do it. He pepper sprayed himself because he doesn't know how to use the spray. And all the cops are standing around laughing, and they tried to say protesters pepper sprayed him, right? This is a kind of, but it's all on camera, right? Which is why they didn't let the media in at Bellwoods, because they wanted to do this without any watching. And then in Lamport, they had to let the media in, and the media caught all of this. So Jennifer, what's her name, Pagliari from The Star, she did a great piece of journalism. She sent over the videos and the pictures to Mayor Tory and said, well, take a look at them if you haven't seen them and comment. And then the man says, well, I'm on the police board, so I can't comment on open police issues. But you just commented. You just said it was the protesters with no evidence. So now people are how about you look at the evidence? And he's like, no, I can't. So, at the very least, can people please say that this man can't be both mayor and on the police board? Can at least people be pick one dude? You can't be on the, Doug Ford's nephew is on the police board. So like the police board is completely useless. And all these city councilors are completely useless because they refuse to actually like do anything to change a bylaw. So if you walk down like that same area where Lamport statement is by, there's people they've extended onto the sidewalks, like so that restaurants can have people on the patios, right? So like we don't want to lose all this business during COVID. So normally you can be out on the sidewalks. We're going to let you. So they made a bylaw so people can have their $15 cocktail, but they won't make a bylaw so that people can live in their tent, right? So they changed the bylaws, and this is what Warren is saying. When it's for the elites and the wealthy, they'll change whatever bylaw. When it's to preserve the life of people, and then they're lying and saying, oh, the shelters are open. They're not open. COVID rates are still sky high in the shelters. Plus, people get raped in shelters. They get stabbed in shelters. They get this stuff robbed in shelters. So it's not like the double crime here is one, being visible, and like, how dare you like sully our eye space with your homelessness. But the other piece is they don't like that people build communities, right? They don't like this idea that you can actually be outside the system, because these are new communities that are coming up, right? People are like, we'd rather, when we're in a shelter, we're on our own. If we're high, we can be kicked out. Somebody can like assault us in our sleep. They can.
Okay.
Did we just lose Elle as well?
Ella's just frozen on us.
Oh.
So,
Are we back? People
Yes.
are like barbecuing and sharing food, you know, like people coming in from, and like walking through. And it's actually a new way of envisioning the world, just like Occupy was trying, you know. So part of the threat too is if we let people know that you don't have to like live inside this system and you can actually build other things, then what else will happen, right? So yeah, like, but I mean, I don't know if you saw the videos. It's like hundreds of police. Somebody played the Imperial March over the speaker when the police were coming in, and like literally it's like hundreds. It's disgusting, man. But like just on your point, Warren, they already cited that here when they were going to clear our encampments. Like we have smaller ones, obviously, but they did a Q&A on the city site, and it said something like, is it a Section 7 violation of people's rights? And they were like, no, because Toronto's done it. So everything migrates. So now we're citing Toronto in order to get rid of our like 2 shelters. It's ridiculous and disgusting. And Tory's
any final comments before we let y'all go? Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking forward to the flag raising on August 1st, because I know we're not having a show then. So, but I'm really urging people to keep some of these issues in their minds as we head towards an election call, because it's not true that there's nothing we can do. We can do something. Whether or not it moves the needle is a whole other thing. But again, you know, if you're in a country like Canada where you do have the right to vote, where to my knowledge, we're not yet in the throes of voter suppression efforts, like in some of our the states, the southern states or whatever. Register and make sure housing, the homeless situation, immigration policy, immigration status, especially for our migrant workers and asylum seekers, institutionalized anti-Black racism in the federal public service and in other institutions that are paid for by your tax dollars. Because we have to stop thinking of government in terms of, yeah, well, that's not me. It is you. It is you. You pay for that with your taxes. And all these things are being done in your name. So please, please, people, please get ready and keep these issues ready.
Sarah, where can people get in touch with you?
Black on Black every Saturday, 11 a.m. to noon, CHUO 89.1 FM in Ottawa.
All right. Elle Jones?
el.jones@msvu.ca.
And Mr. Clark, where can people get a hold of you when you're not on mute?
Only here on Sundays. No, I'm joking. Visit my website, warrenclark.ca.
And also, Warren, I do want you to take a few quick seconds to talk about an upcoming event you have coming.
Oh, Barbershop Talk. Yeah.
Yes, please.
So we have actually just texting him. Actually, you just texted me right now. Dr. Tamari Katosa and Dr. Charles Simeon Aaron will be discussing the next Barbershop Talk in terms of theme of the myth of the absent Black father. So this is going to be an amazing event, like it always is. Instead of having just Warren speak, there's other people who can speak and share their perspective. And Dr. Tamari Katosa has great knowledge, and we've had some amazing conversations in the past about this topic. So I'm looking forward to this on July 31st. If you're interested in attending in person, yes, you can attend in person if you're in Toronto. And if you want a free haircut, there's opportunity for that because I'm not paying for it, but I am paying for it tomorrow. You can visit our website on the ACM. We are acmp.com. And if you're interested, please visit our website again. If you need to get a hold of me, you can't find it, warrenclark.ca. But if you can't make it in person, we do have online spots as well to join the conversation, because that's what it is. It's a conversation for us to continue to learn.
Well, thank you so much. And I wanted to make sure you shared that with our audience today, Warren. And also, I'm a big fan and respect Dr. Katosa a lot because there's his book.
There you go.
What's his book called?
It is called Appealing Because He is Appealing: Black Masculinities, Colonialism, and Erotic Racism. And I've been reading into it. Solid book. So thank you everyone for taking time to watch us live on the replay today. I want to shout out to Serena, our dedicated fan from the United States, Kathy Grant, and others. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you also to Elle, Sarah, Warren, and Cesar. They will be back in 2 weeks' time with another roundtable. We'll be back next week with a special guest edition of Black Canada Talking. As always, I'd like to say, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And remember to give yourselves grace. Thanks very much to BIA Media for the production job. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith and never settle.